Maybe you have experienced some kind of church hurt in your life, or maybe it's you trying to discover where to go from here and you're not too sure where to start when it comes to your faith journey. Well, stay tuned to this next episode of Living Fully Fit, where me and my guest talk about different aspects and stories, and her story especially, in this next segment of Living Fully Fit called Faith Unfiltered: The Realities of Family, Friends, and Toxic Church Trolls. Well, welcome to another episode of Living Fully Fit. I'm Coach AJ, and this is a segment where we're going to be looking at spiritual fitness here. And I have a special guest this time, another special guest, and we're going to be talking in this topic called Faith Unfiltered: The Realities of Family, Friendship, and Toxic Church Trolls. Yeah, we're going to be going there into a little bit of depth. It's going to get a little messy, but the intent of this isn't church bashing or people bashing. It's telling our story so that you, the viewer, you, the listener, can find healing, can maybe relate, and figure out what you can look out for as you are growing in your spiritual walk. That's the whole purpose of this. There are many out there who will probably assume the worst. They assume probably that this video is for them and it's directed to them. It might, because that's a personal conviction. But we're going to look at how do we grow and learn from these experiences in our personal stories. And so I have a special guest. I have Katelyn Ross here, one of our close friends. And her and her husband have had an experience in the last few months of, church and church, not really hurt, but church toxicity.
Yes.
And what that looks like. So before we get into the depths and the eaches of it all, let's really kind of start with your introduction of who you are and your experience starting off in the church we both went to, how y'all got there, and, stuff from there.
All right. So, being military and this being a huge military community, we were wanting to search for a home church because we had one at our previous duty station. So finding a church and getting into that church was very important to us. It was kind of a hard decision, because once you start making those kinds of decisions, especially as a new believer, I don't want to say I'm a new believer, but I grew up in the church and I was at Sunday school. I did everything. Like, that's all I knew on Sundays was Sundays. We were in church from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Yeah.
For my husband, it was a different story. He didn't grow up in the church. So when I say new believers, it was like new believers within our marriage and trying to build that foundation. So, we asked around and everybody was like recommending this one church. And I was like, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And my husband agreed with that. And so we took a step in faith, I would say, and we went for it and spent about 2.5 years there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So how long into the process of tending there did you guys get involved?
I want to say it was closer to about a year. There was a specific sermon basically saying, if you're not serving, find somewhere else to serve. And so instead of looking at it as like a flag, now I don't want to say we were uneducated about it, but we weren't aware of like certain things being said. We were just like, man, this place is awesome. This place is cool. And let's start serving. And so instead of looking at it from a different angle, that's kind of the angle we approached. So it was I would say it was closer to a year that we started serving there.
And where did y'all serve initially?
So I want to say, I think initially I started on the prayer team. It was prayer team I started on, and then I casually made my way into the students ministry, which I absolutely love the kids. My husband being more introverted that he is, he was like, I'll find somewhere else that I can serve that's not so much people-y situation. So he served with security.
Yeah, okay, cool. And in serving that, since y'all were there for 2 years, were there things that y'all saw like that were kind of like, what's that about? But you know what? Not a big deal. We love it here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, initially, right?
Initially, yeah. It was just more of a water off our back type situation, because we were like, we're still new here. Like, we don't want to get involved in all that.
Yeah.
Necessarily. I don't want to call it drama, but that's kind of what it looks like when you're looking in on something. Mm-hmm. And so we were just like, in our hearts, we were like, oh, everybody has issues. Let's just take a step back and go from there. But there were there were things we started seeing and hearing, and we were just like, okay, kind of just water off our back, because we were just like, don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I got you. And everybody wants to avoid conflict at
Mm-hmm.
most times. We don't like conflict. I say most people.
Yeah.
There are some that
Yeah.
will run toward it, with their swords, bearing their
Yeah.
swords and shields. But I think most people don't want that kind of conflict. They want to stay out of stay keeping peace and everything. And I get that, and that's what we tend to, ignore those flags. I know me and Jess did the same thing. We saw a lot of things. I served on the worship team.
Mm-hmm.
She served in the kids ministry, and we just saw and heard things. We're like, oh, what's that? Not big. It's not my problem. Not my monkey, not my circus. So that's kind of what
Yes.
we kind of saw it as. And that, for me, I look back now, it's like, man, I should have said something or, stepped away back then,
Yeah.
especially knowing I know from back in my ministry days, because I, did 14 years of ministry before the army. And so I'm like, man, I should know better, I really should know better. But, you get caught up in relationships, especially, and
Oh,
you build those
yes.
and you're like, I don't want to lose this relationship. Because I think being, especially serving in the youth ministry, you probably developed a lot of close
Oh, yeah.
relationships, right?
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of relationships built. There was a lot. And what they were built on, honestly, I can't say, because it was just a all in the moment kind of thing. Um, the reason I did it was for the kids.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to be there for the kids. There were a lot of relationships built. There was a lot of relationships built outside of kind of that serving setting. Um, and there was a lot of hurt, and there was a lot of hurt. And for me, being who I am, my husband always tells me, he goes, you have too big of a heart. Like, my husband has the spirit of discernment.
Mm.
I will never discredit him for that, because everything he has said, it has been correct. And he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Don't you hate that?
he'll tell you, and I'm like, yeah, you were right, I guess. Like, okay, fine. But yeah, you were right. So there was a lot of relationships, because, in that church setting, you kind of crave that family setting. You crave that friendship, that family friendship. You build a lot of relationships with families who go to that church, and you're like, man, I get to see my friends and go to church on Sunday. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's awesome until you get too involved.
Mm.
And I'm in nursing school. So one thing, I've always had the heart for caring for people. That is just who I am. I don't know what spiritual gift, I don't know. Somebody's told me it before, and I can't remember.
Hospitality, typically.
Yeah. And so it's just like one of those things. I was like, my husband always tells me, you can't fix everybody. You can't. And I'm like, I'll die trying. But I realized, like, after everything we've been through, that I'm okay with not fixing it, because it shows who those people are and what their intentions were. And that when those people are done with you, they jump to the next person and cling to them like leeches.
So, did you see it when you were there, where after a while of serving, that you kind of were like, kind of pushed to the side, and then the next person was kind of
Oh,
put in
yeah.
there?
Oh, yes. 100%. That was very predominant in that situation. Like, you're used for X amount of time, you're important for X amount of time, and then all of a sudden some new couple comes to the church, and then they get filled in, and you kind of feel like you're just like, oh, okay. Like, I thought it was
Yeah.
more important than that, but all right. Like, wow, I guess I mean nothing. I'm just a number. And that's
But you
a
know
lot
what?
of
You
times
should
what
just
it
be
felt like.
humble. Just be humble.
Yeah, yeah, humble.
Say thank you.
Yeah, and make sure that you say thank you even after you get pushed out.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen in so many different ministry circles. I saw that in my own ministry when I was a youth pastor. We treat the new person as the new shiny thing, the new toy on Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
and the old toy is just kind of collecting dust, basically. We still want it. We don't want to get rid of it,
Mm-hmm.
but we like this new thing, and we're gonna focus on that for a while. I saw that. I told Jess this, a while back. I saw this whenever I went to school. I went to army school for about a whole month and a half. I come back, they already had a new guy playing on the worship team, which is fine, great, because they were lacking in male singers,
Mm-hmm.
but they were allowing him to do a lot of things that I definitely wasn't allowed to do. Like, he would not show up for a rehearsal, and that was okay. But if the rule was, if you didn't show up for rehearsal, you didn't play on Sunday.
And I heard that actually several times from certain worship members on the team that was that. And I was like, is this why you're bending over backwards, like breaking your back?
Yeah.
Like, because you don't want to lose your spot? Is
Yeah.
that what it is? Like your health, like not only just like mental health is like a huge conspiracy with Christians in this modern day, especially these modern day churches. But I truly believe like you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else. And
Absolutely.
I straight up told her, I was like, why? Why are you doing this? You know, it's okay to say no. No is a sentence.
Yeah. What's that guilt trip? And I know for me, like it was towards the, but before I went to Korea, I remember I was serving almost every Sunday
Yeah.
and all services. And I remember one time it was a one Sunday weekend I didn't serve and I had duty.
Mm-hmm.
I had duty. And I get a call like, hey, AJ, we have no guys. And I look at Jess and I'm like, what do you think? She's like, it's up to you. I support whatever you want to do. And I was like, I'll do it. And then the day after that, after my recovery, I had to go off to school.
Oh
So
gosh.
it was like, and what was funny is I wasn't looking for accolades or
Right.
thank you, but it was like, dang. And then after I was gone for that school, me and my fiance were just forgotten. We're
Yeah.
like cast aside. And I remember reaching out. Actually, I had a one-on-one conversation with the pastor, the senior pastor. And he just pretty much gaslit me the entire time, talked over me, said,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, maybe it's you guys," and or "Oh yeah, 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 yeah," and he talked over me the entire
Mm-hmm.
time where, it was like, hey, I have a concern that I'm about to go away to Korea for a year and I want to make sure my family's taken care of.
Yeah.
And it's sad that I'm gone for only a month and a half, give some change. And my thing is like, I'm a strong Christian,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of people who are baby Christians who are
Yep.
thrust into leadership and you take that away from them, what's going to happen?
Yep.
That's my concern. And luckily for you, you said you grew up in church, so you kind of know a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But your husband, though,
Doesn't. He didn't. And I don't want to like say that he doesn't know because it's a learning process. Like
yeah,
the man he is today is not the man who he was.
yeah,
And so he truly, his walk began when we began dating
yeah,
because he came from a different background. I love my in-laws, I love my family, um, but I can't discredit him in any sort of way from our fashion because he was still learning.
yeah,
Like he's like, how do I become how am I supposed to be this figure that I'm called to be? Like, it was just one of those things he's battled a lot with. So he's a newer Christian. He's a very strong Christian man now. And so we're grateful for what we went through
yeah.
in order to get to where we are at now.
So here's the thing. I remember you and Brandon were talking about telling me and Jess this a while back. So y'all were, very involved, very invested in church, going to events, being
Mm-hmm.
involved in serving, and then you had mentioned that it started affecting your marriage, actually being as involved as you were, but also some of the messages preached at the pulpit were starting to kind of affect your marriage in a weird or maybe kind of not really an adverse way, but not in a positive way either.
Yeah. So I would say a lot of the effect was coming from the relationships we had built with people at the church. And it was because there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff we were dealing with.
Yeah.
And when we kept encouraging, hey, you need to go to the church, you need to seek counseling, you need to do these things, me being who I am, I'm like, no, you need to like give them grace, give them grace. And my husband's like, Katelyn, like, we have to step back because this is affecting us now. Like it was affecting us in a very negative way. And it's like, we don't want this in our home.
Yeah.
Our home is supposed to be our place that we are comfortable in, that you can feel God's love in when you walk in. And that's our goal. But because we were trying to fix everybody else's problems, it was beginning to affect us internally.
Uh,
We were always putting like, it was always, hey, can you sign up for this event or whatever? And then Brandon's like, he's like, we haven't had a weekend, to ourselves.
yeah.
And being in nursing school, like I'm already busy Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
I already have enough mom guilt. I already have enough guilt of not being around because I'm studying, I'm at clinicals, or I'm doing all these things. And so it was almost as if church was taking over our lives, or like our home life as well, because it was always constant. What do we have this weekend? Or what are we doing this weekend? And it was never, let's take a step back and let's breathe, because I was like, I'm willing to bend over backwards for these people because I love them so much, but the love was not reciprocated.
Just so would you be honest here and say that was it like church first, then God, and then family in a
Yeah,
way? Okay.
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
And that's a scary thing because I
Yeah.
think a lot of churches manipulate that as well. This is for God. No, this is for the church, the organization. I had a pastor like that once where I remember we had lost some staff members. We had lost our worship pastor at one of our campuses. We lost our graphic designer.
Oh, wow.
And since I did both of those things on the
Yeah.
side, my
You were
pastor's
like,
like, "Well, AJ, you can do that." I'm like, "Sure, but can I get a raise?" And he's like, "Well, you should be doing it for Jesus."
oh,
And I
yeah.
was like, dude, I have a family to feed.
Yeah.
I love Jesus, but I'm already working like 50 hours a week with a youth pastor salary. And at that time, I was getting paid maybe 30K
Hmm.
I was the only person on the staff that had an actual degree,
Hmm.
in my field, in ministry. And here I am getting paid the least amount of all the staff.
Yeah.
And I'm getting piled on this guilt, like, well, you should be doing this for Jesus. Don't you love Jesus? And I'm like, yeah, I love Jesus, and I don't want to lose my job that I do have. So
Yeah.
I did it, and I'm sure that's kind of the feeling y'all had. Like,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
we don't want to disappoint people.
Disappointment for me is like a big no-no.
Yeah.
Like I can't stand the word disappointment. If somebody looks at me and says they're disappointed in me, I'm like you just kicked my dog, like a 100%. I'm like, I can't do this. And then like, after stepping back, well, I would say a little further into our journey into the church, we start realizing the church isn't a place.
Mm,
Church is people.
yeah.
And it truly is. And everybody misuses the when two or three or more are gathered, just to reference,
Oh yeah.
you
Matthew
know,
18.
yeah. I was misleaded. I actually talked to Jessica at one point and we talked about it and we talked through it and I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Like, this is not what I thought. They're like two or three more gathered in prayer. And I'm like, that's not what the Bible says though. Like I started doing the five before and five below and I was like, understanding what context was and understanding how things were used. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. And so, realizing that and going, I can have church with my husband.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting on my couch, we can read our Bibles together. We could do our devotionals together.
Not according to the senior pastor of that church.
No,
You can't.
it drives me nuts because they're like, it, what is that called? The gospel prosperity
Prosperity gospel.
gospel.
Yeah.
And that's what it seems like. There's so much of that. And like, it was so funny because I was like talking to a friend of mine who's also a believer. Her and her husband are believers. And we were like, hey, listen. So like as events started unfolding, and when I mean like unfolding and getting set on fire type situation, we were talking and she's like, dude, that place sounds like prosperity gospel. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, it does. And I was like, she goes, that's like Joe Olstein type stuff right there. And I was like, ooh, like,
Just not as big.
just not as big. Like, I was like, dang. Like, I kind of felt guilty for being like involved in something like that. But at the same time, like, I'm grateful I was because I've learned so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we learned our best lessons from those hardships,
Mm-hmm.
as sucky as it is to be part
Oh,
of something like that. You're like, man, that sucked. That didn't feel right. But you look back, well, this was a lesson learned.
oh, 100%.
And you ask yourself, what did I learn from this? And how can I grow from this?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people go into the situation and they find that church hurt. I hate using that church hurt, but I think it's a derogatory term a lot of times. Like, oh, you're just church hurt. Well, there is church hurt because church are people. There's people hurt, period.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference, I think, between regular people hurt and church hurt is that most people tend to recognize that, oh, I'm sorry I hurt you.
Yeah.
And they want to make things right most time, not all the time. But I think with church hurt and the organization, you just need more humility. You need more Jesus. It's a you thing, not a us thing.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing, that's what I've seen, especially in the last year of being kind of stepping away from all that. I look at like my journey. I didn't see it really. I started seeing it more and more because it started with me just making a comment on Facebook to asking questions, asking more questions. And then when I left for Korea is when I saw it for real.
Oh.
And especially when Jess was kind of treated the way she was treated, I was like, this isn't definitely not right. What the heck's going on here?
Yeah.
And we prayed about it. We left quietly. it was when a lot of people started leaving the church. People assume it's my friend Chuck, our friend Chuck.
Oh yeah.
Everybody's like, it's
Everybody's so
oh
quick to
yeah,
blame him for that.
it was Chuck. Chuck's just poisoning the
Yeah.
people's hearts. Like, no, not really. I had questions, but the
Yeah.
thing is, it was him and many other staff members that left the church, many other members of the church that left the church, and I'm like, there's something amiss here.
Oh yes. Oh
And when
yes.
he left, I reached out to him because he was the only person on staff that had my back throughout my little ordeal with some of the senior staff members.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the only one that had some common sense. He actually was very logical and methodical about it. And that's why I said, hey man, why did you leave? You were like awesome, when you're there. So what's going on? You're like very easy and approachable, where some of the staff are like, yeah, I'm in the green room.
I'm too good for everybody.
Well, yeah, look at me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need my security team. And
Yeah.
that's where I was like, okay, this has to be, something's not right here. And I started asking more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm the villain because I make content, and everybody assumes my content is about them. Now, I will be honest. Some of my content is inspired by people, but here's the thing. If they come at me with their stuff, it's hard not to make content about them.
Yeah, because like who else is going through it? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, and if you feel that convicted, then maybe you need to go back in Matthew 18 if you
Maybe
have a
it's you.
yeah.
If you feel like, well, I think you're directing this at our church or me. Well, if you think that, maybe you should, examine your heart
Yeah.
instead of like, oh, you're being mean and spiteful and you're just church hurt and
Yes.
you just need to forgive, like, and not be bitter. I'm like, I'm not bitter at all. I'm the most non-bitter person.
Yeah, you're
You
yeah.
know?
No, we've come to learn that very quickly, but I always tell people I'm like, "Hey, guess what? Your feelings aren't factual.
No,
Feelings
absolutely.
aren't facts. And if you feel a certain way, doesn't mean that it's the truth."
Oh, people translate that as a lot.
Oh yeah. And honestly, like a lot of the times, like one of the relationships we had built that we had to do a lot of actually recently, on TikTok, obviously, because that seems to be the place.
It is.
um, you know, it was just to see some people bring up names on there after not speaking to them for like, as long as we have. And I'm like, dang. And then like I thought this was just baffling. That same relationship we had built, we found out the other day that they're apparently still keeping tabs on my husband.
Oh, that's sad.
And I was like, all I could think of the song was like, why are you so obsessed with me? Like, seriously, like, wow, like we haven't even like we moved on from you guys and you're still doing this. Like, why
That's
is this
beyond a troll.
okay?
That's like a troll under the bridge eating some fecal matter. That's
Like,
like
dude,
that's like beyond the troll.
I don't understand. I don't understand. And I was just like, what? Like, he came home and told me this, and I was like, wow.
Well, what's funny is like I'll make my content, and it's sometimes it's inspired from recent events. Sometimes it's not. I have a memory hit me, and I'm like, oh, remember that when I was a youth pastor, this, and I make content.
Yeah.
And what's funny is even recently for me, TikTok, I have a staff member of a church, the
Uh,
youth pastor of a church, the youth pastor directing his comments toward me, wanting to start a battle with me and my fiance. And then what's funny, he was being very ugly and just rude to my fiance about it, to Jess, and Jess is like had enough and snaps back and he's like, "Oh, I can't believe you cussed at me." Like, are you're what? You're surprised? Like, and she's like, she's like, granted, I shouldn't have done that. She's like, I should know better. I should be better than that. But she's like, but then again, that boy like wouldn't stop. And I'm
yeah,
like, I'm
I
not mad at
saw
you.
it.
I said, I'm not mad at you.
I
I'm
would.
like, and I was telling her, so it's like, kicking a dog in the corner. After a while, it's gonna growl at you to give you warning. That's gonna snap at you,
Mm-hmm.
and you can be like mad at the dog for biting you because you kicked it for so long in the corner.
Yeah.
And eventually people are gonna snap back. And I think with these I call them trolls because that's what they are.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason for them to engage with you guys or with us. And even if, let's say I was making content that's very obvious about their organization, if I was making dropping names and everything, if it really bothers you, ask your question, why? Why does that bother you?
Yeah.
If if unless I'm really being like vicious, which I'm not,
No.
then why engage? I don't understand that. But let's backpedal here because
We could go on and
we can
on.
go on about that for sure. So as y'all were still in the relationships and still in the kind of the honeymoon
Hmm.
phase of the church, what were some of the red flags y'all saw before you got your awakening? 'Cause that's kind of, I'm curious, what things you saw, you and your husband saw, like, huh, what's that about? Because you said Brandon has a discerning spirit,
Oh yeah.
so what are things that he saw and he told you, or maybe you saw, you're like, oh no, and what were
So
those things?
I would say so. In sermons and like it was towards I don't timeline wise. I was probably maybe 2 3 months before we ended up dismissing and like just leaving. We started noticing, especially with all the politics coming around and stuff, there's just a lot of stuff getting hit over the head constantly. And it was like, are we at church or are we at like a government rally type situation? And it was like, don't get me wrong, like I get it. We have Democrats, we have Republicans, and typically Christians are more conservative and they're the Republican, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, I just don't feel like it belongs in the pulpit. And Brandon and I were like, this something's not right here. There's something starting to go on. And this was when they were becoming more heavily involved with, like, in having people like the candidates come into the church and stuff like that. And, you know, granted, some people were like, yeah, like 100% before this, I'm like, there are some people who do go to church who may not think that way.
Yeah.
And just because they don't think that way doesn't mean they don't love the Lord. Now, I see how it's contradicting at times because, the whole abortion topic and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But at the same time, like, what if they were like that? And now they're like, maybe there's something inside of them that's saying something else. And then they go into a church that's constantly hitting somebody over the head with this. And now they're like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I'm staying right where I'm at. What if we're actually pushing people away from Jesus?
Absolutely. I think about this, what if there's a young girl in that audience who had an abortion
Yeah.
and she doesn't know what to do? She's trying to find peace. She's struggling maybe and decides to go to church because she thinks maybe church will help,
Hmm.
and goes there and it's a political rally,
Yeah.
anti-abortion, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, this, that, and third. And imagine to her dismay, instead of finding peace, hope, love, what Jesus is, she hears that. And I'm not saying that sin is not sin, but where is the grace in all of that? Where is the peace and where is the healing? Someone posted something that church is a hospital for the sick. I argued it's not. Church is a place to equip the saints. But then again, if this person said that, then why is he blindly following this leader who isn't a doctor for the sick?
Yeah.
He's more of like I guess, a salt miner throwing the salt on the wound.
Hmm.
That's what it looks like and sounds like. Like you said, that's kind of a big red flag. 'Cause you're like, why aren't we just preaching the word of God here?
Yeah. And I like, don't get me wrong, like past sermons have been amazing.
Yeah,
When you're a great talker, you're a great talker. Like I'll give it to you. But when does enough become enough? Like, if you have some sort of personal goal to become the governor of Texas or something, go do it.
yeah.
Just be quiet about it. If that's what you really want to do, don't lead people on to just try to like build your whatever you want to call it to get to that point. Don't be it's almost like you're using people at that point.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And so it's like, that's why I'm like, yeah, we're done. We're done with that. And then I would say here's the good topic here. The next big thing that we questioned heavily. And so just for clarity, we left on our own terms. We did not speak to you. We did not speak to Chuck. We never reached out to you guys till after leaving.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, though, because they see we have a relationship, because they see Jessica and I have gone out and done stuff, and they're like, oh my God, like they did this, like they pulled them out. I'm
They
like,
poisoned their
they
mind and
poisoned
their
them, they
soul.
drink their Kool-Aid. Like, no, like let me just squash that right there, right now. And like, God is my witness. We were sitting on the couch one night and I don't even remember what platform I was on. I was on social media and I came across, and it was the 90-day challenge. And I was like, huh? Literally, I think I had to read it like, I don't even know, like 5 times. And I jumped up off the couch. I said, Brandon, turn off what you're doing. We need to read this. And so reading it, as we were, as being in the church and like growing up in the church, we were always taught that tithe is between you and God.
Yeah.
That is a you and God thing, or your spouse. Like it is an intimate thing, because you're putting your faith and trust in God and going, you know what, this is not our money. This is God's money.
Yeah.
And I want him to do what he wants with it, not what people want with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so further in the challenge, I was like, we need to be challenged. Like, I think of some like fitness thing, right? No, not that at all. And it was like, so if you had to sign up for it, because I actually went back
Yes, you
and
do.
looked, and I was like, what? So you had to actually sign up for it. And then we started asking more questions. And it said, if you guarantee like 10% of your gross income for 90 days and God doesn't bless you, I
Your money
stopped
back guaranteed.
cold. Like, I stopped dead in my tracks, and I looked at Brandon and I was like, what? And the first person I called were my parents. Because, we're younger.
Yeah.
It says go. I'm not calling you old, mom and dad, sorry. But go to your elders.
Yeah, absolutely. People you
And,
trust.
yeah. And so I was like, we read it to them, and my mom was like, no, that's a red flag. That's like that's a Hail Mary.
It's a giant red flag.
Yeah. Like, big old red flag. And I was like, what does this even mean? She goes, you need to start asking questions. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Like, the most non-confrontational person there is.
Oh, no.
And I need to start asking questions. I was like, my husband will do that. And so there was actually, we tried Matthew 18ing it, and with the head pastor, and we never heard back. And not only did we get one person involved, we got a couple other people involved to try to get in contact. Brennan goes, he has a week. If that doesn't happen, we've seen their true colors. We've seen what the point of this is, and we're done. And I was like,
wow,
you are the head of our household. I'm going to follow you, and you and I are on the same page. But I'm not going to say no to that, because I'm not going to keep, mind you, we had been tithing 10%. Okay. We did that because that's what we felt we were called to do.
Yeah.
Personally. And so, there's this whole other spiel of, if you have a problem, we're going to pull your tithing records first.
Yeah. He said that. The senior pastor of this church has said that so many times.
Why? Like, seriously. So if I wasn't tithing that 10%, or maybe I was somebody else in the church, are you going to guilt somebody into tithing that 10%? What if there's a family out there who maybe not be as strong in their faith as other people, and they're tithing 2 to 3%, but they're also serving in the church?
Or they're giving their time instead of their talent and treasure.
What are you going to tell them? You're not good if you're not giving us money.
Yeah.
And then when you ask, where's that money going? It's just going in circles. Oh, that's none of nobody's business. And it's like, hold on a second. We attended the church, 2 weeks ago, and on the front of their pamphlet, it said, this is where we're at. This is what we've done. It had everything written out.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's how it should be. And that's how it used to be when I was growing up.
Same here. Oh, yeah. I grew up in the Southern Baptist church. My grandfather was a pastor. I remember I became a member of the church, and then we got baptized. And I asked my grandfather, what does that mean, be a member? He's like, well, you get a vote. This is your member of this church. You get a say. And I remember I went to first member meeting, was boring as heck. I was like 10 or 11 years old. But to this day, I still remember that they were voting for simple things like the salary of certain so-and-so, or, hey, we're going to get this carpet, or do we need carpet?
Yeah.
Do we need to spend this money on this? Here's a cheaper way. Here's the options. And the church voted yay or nay on those kind of things. Mm-hmm. Now, I think, sometimes those kind of churches work. Sometimes the elder-led church works too, as long as there's some kind of checks and balances.
Yeah.
There were checks and balances, so there wasn't like where does this money go into? Because my grandfather was getting paid. He was bivocational. He wasn't getting paid much. He was getting paid maybe enough to cover gas and some food, and that's about it. Because it was a small little Baptist church. Mm-hmm. But there's transparency. Mm-hmm. And the sad thing about all these newer modern churches, there's very little transparency. and there's like a pie chart, because if you look at their yearly book that they put out on the foyer, there's a pie chart with percentages,
Mm-hmm.
but that's it. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't say, well, this percentage goes to staff, or well, how much
Goes
goes
to
to
the
staff,
staff.
and who gets what. What's wrong with showing that? Because I want to know how much this pastor who's rarely here because he's always traveling gets paid.
Mm-hmm.
How much this worship leader gets paid, or whatever it is, where this money's going to. It says outreach and missions. Oh, which missions are we helping support? What outreach? Because I don't see any outreach.
Nope.
I see a lot of events at the church. What outreach? And when you ask those questions, it's like you get the runaround, or you get cast aside, and get treated like a leper,
Yeah.
about asking questions. So back to your
Yeah.
story. So you started asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
You gave them a week.
Mm-hmm.
After that, what happened then?
So that was kind of when everything unfolded.
Mm.
Like 100%. It was kind of interesting because it it was like constant bashing of leaving the church. It was constant, well, now I know why you really left. Oh, I really know. No, you don't know nothing. I didn't tell you nothing because I didn't trust you.
Yeah.
There's no trust there
All
in any of
assumptions.
that. All assumptions. And instead of saying, like, let's sit down and talk and have a civil conversation, everyone wants to come at you behind a screen. And so there was a couple instances. One was somebody being on the worship team who just lit into me because we chose to leave because I didn't tell her the truth. And I was like, I owe you nothing. Like, I owe you nothing.
Yeah.
If you're not going to be there for me when I'm hurting or I'm low, but you're going to be willing to come at me when I feel like I was on the ground being kicked like a dog because leaving hurt. Because I thought what I thought, and what hurt was leaving what I thought was a true friendships,
It's a family.
true family. Like, that's what I thought. And that's what hurt the most. But they were sitting there listening to one-sided versus giving anybody else an opportunity to say, is that really like, there was no questioning.
Yeah.
And for me, that just shows the true identity of a person when you're not willing to just sit down with me. And then, she was trying to be this like middleman and this person trying to bring two people back together when she had no recollection of what we had even been through.
Yeah.
And it's like, stop trying to force something. It's like two opposing magnets.
Yeah.
Like, we have tried. But from a different point of view, from their point of view, it was, we never tried. We never did this. We never did that. We got, this is the part that really set us over, was when we finally got reached out by somebody from the church and said, it has been evident that you and your spouse, from not attending Crown, from not attending Forge, from stop tithing. And I was like, first and foremost, how do you know that we even stopped tithing? Because we didn't stop tithing. Like, what?
Red alert.
Like, hold on a second. And oh, by the way, I'm sorry. Like, I wish I could have made it to events, I mean, not now, but like, when I was there, like,
Yeah.
it sucked not being able to go because I either had to take my son places to therapy and stuff like that. And like, I couldn't do that
Or you to work.
midweeks and work. And like, and for somebody like that on the outside looking in, is like, well, then you don't have enough time for God. And I'm like,
Oh my gosh. That is terrible.
you have no idea who I am. So don't come making accusations towards me. And so it's just like, one day I hope that people that we went through who hurt us will genuinely change. But at the end of the day, I like, the one thing I'm taking for Brandon and I, like, this piece, is that they're going to answer to God someday.
Oh, we all are.
And
Absolutely.
100%. And, I'm not perfect. I never will be. I know everybody has their issues. I know that, pastors have their own problems. But the problem here in this new generation of these modern day churches is that there is no accountability. There's zero. So if something happens in the church, I feel like a meeting should be called. I
Absolutely.
feel like they should have to apologize. I feel like they should have to be able to be real with that congregation.
You mean do what Matthew 18 says?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. It's so sad. It's like, you know, as a child, if I went and like punched my brother,
Yeah.
like I was made to apologize after probably getting my butt whooped and
Yeah.
then getting sent to my room. Why are we not doing that with pastors these days? What are you trying to
Church leaders,
protect?
period. Yeah, exactly. Like, no one's holding each other accountable. It's like there's obviously hurt happening. There is a trend of hurt happening, but no one wants to address the elephant in the room.
Nope.
It's like, well, nothing to see here. Everything's going great. Look how much we're doing, how we're growing. We're building this building. Nothing to see here.
You're building that building on lies. That
Absolutely.
foundation is not a foundation. It is going to come crumbling down because God will have the final say in that. And that's literally the one thing that has kept me sane through the rest of this. Because, like, I remember having conversations with Jess. Like, there was something that the senior pastor said that really, really hit a chord in me, and it hurt. It was talking about like how um like people in these days have the highest mental health disorders, blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah, whatever. And so, and that basically that trauma is used as an excuse.
Oh boy.
And I remember vividly, immediately texted Jess. I was like, so me being sexually abused as a child, that trauma, and going through EMDR for a year and a half, and having to go. And let me tell you something for people who don't know what like anything about mental health or anything like that. I You got to learn. But ultimately, it is a different feeling of hurt and how hard it is when you're sitting there and everybody's like, just trust Jesus. And I'm like, I'm trying to work through this stuff. And so I felt like anytime there was a topic, especially on sermons about like mental health,
Let go and let God.
it hurt. And I was like, I tell people, by the grace of God, I got through what I got through. By the grace of God, He gave me a PCM who listened to me, who took care of me, and then finally sat me down and basically slapped me around and said, your body is your parasympathetic and sympathetic system is in a fight or flight right now. Like, those are your two systems. So you have your sympathetic, which is your fight or flight, and you have your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically those two were going in a fight. And like, this was January 17th of last year.
Oh wow.
Mind you, the only person who ever reached out to me and continuously checked on me was Chuck. Not once. And that was when my husband was deployed.
Wow.
And so going through that and battling through that, there were nights I was on the ground in my Bible going, God, just stop this. Stop this. Like 3 a.m., stop this. And so that built me in a whole different way in my walk with Christ than anything. And, people are like, you don't need to take meds. You don't need to do this. Hey, fun fact for you. I'm on anxiety and depression medications, but God has sustained me through that. And I don't plan on staying on them,
Yeah.
but quit the stigma with it.
Absolutely. And I think what's scary about that is you think about that message as being preached in that
Yeah.
pulpit. You have people who are impressionable in the audience, and they're like, okay, I'm going to take my meds, and it's going to do way more
Oh, yeah.
damage.
Oh, yeah.
And he's not a professional.
Nope.
I don't think he's a professional anything, honestly. He's a shyster.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Like, don't talk on topics you don't know about.
No.
That's my thing. And it's like,
No.
quit bashing certain things. And like, so, here I am just talking, but like, after going through something like that, that really pushed me over. That really hurt.
Yeah.
In ways that nobody will understand. And my
So.
husband saw it, and he saw, I mean, I didn't eat or drink for 4 days. I lost 11 pounds in 4 days because what I was battling.
Wow.
And the only person who continuously reached out to me was Chuck. And, he helped me change my mindset. And I think I've used this mindset ever since he changed me. I actually have it written on my Bible. He's like, Katelyn, stop saying what if. Stop. Like, get that out of your vocabulary. He said, start saying even if. Even if this happens, I'm still going to love the Lord. Even if this happens, my family's still there for me.
Yeah.
Even if, so on, so on, so on. And that impacted me in a way that he'll never understand. I hope he watches this and is like, yes, like you don't know, Chuck, but that really, it hit me in a different part of my heart that I needed, because nobody checked in on me. I mean, nobody. And that was our first deployment, my first semester of nursing school. I have a 6-year-old. It was crazy. It was crazy.
And you felt quite alone, I'm sure.
100%.
And
100%. I had
that
my
1%.
family, but my family's like further away. And
Yeah.
they were, I mean, granted, they would drop, in a matter of
Everything.
time,
Yeah.
everything can come. But when you're attending a church on a Sunday, you want to be like, and you're going through something like that, community is everything.
Well, it's funny. They throw this phrase around, spiritual family.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's a modern thing because, like, the last church I was at before I joined the army was very much like that too. This is your spiritual family. Your spiritual family. This is your big. This is your family. Forget blood. This is family right here. And I think that's a good idea if it's
True.
true. You're right. But if it's not true, then it's manipulative.
Very.
Because think about when you left. Heck, when we left, even if we left quietly, no one asked, "Hey, what happened to AJ and Jess? What happened to Brendan and Katelyn? What happened?"
I
But
actually
some
got a
people did.
text 4 months after leaving. 4 months after leaving, from a leadership,
Wow.
from the church, going, "Hey, so I haven't seen you been signing up for any of the student events." And I was like, "Yeah, because we don't go there anymore."
Wow.
And I was like, I told Jess, I was like, 4 months,
We
dude.
need some volunteers. Who hasn't signed up?
I
Oh, here
know.
we go. Where have they been? We need them.
Like, we were there every Sunday. Like, how do you not notice that somebody's not there?
Yeah. Well,
That was just like, wow.
well, for me, I know, like when I was in Korea, about maybe about 3 or 4 months in, Jess told me the story. She was talking to the senior pastor, and he saw her. And it's like, oh, hey, where's your man?
Yes.
And she told me that. I was like, what? I had a phone conversation with him telling him
Yeah.
I was going to be in Korea. All the staff knew I was going to be in Korea. I was friends with him on Facebook at the time, and he liked the post that, hey, I'm going to be in Korea, pay for my family. So what that tells you right there, that you feel like a number. You feel
Oh, yeah.
like, well, I was just like a cog in the wheel, and once I am not useful, I'm useless, and I'm tossed to the side
Until they need you again.
until they need you again. Which now they obviously don't want.
No.
I already burned those bridges now, but that's okay. That's life. But I look now, it's like, geez, I'm so glad I'm out of that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys are too. Now that you see some of the reactions, because now here we are months later, and they're still getting
Oh, yeah.
harassment and trolling and all that stuff. And what's funny about it, here's the thing, is like, if you don't like what you see, why follow, why look? Block me.
Yes.
It's a simple one. I'm not going to block anybody because, one, I mean, for me, it creates value for my TikTok and YouTube, and it helps the algorithm. So, like, go for it. I mean, unless you're being really evil and disgusting, I'm not going to block the person.
Yeah. There's
But
no point in that at all. And so I almost forgot. So there was a funny part. So, we started watching Chuck's podcasts,
yeah,
and, my husband has zero social media. He's not going to have it. He doesn't want
yeah.
it. He wants nothing to do with it, which is fine. Like, I respect that. He commented on one of his videos, and then I get a random message from
Oh
leadership
no.
at the church. Your husband shouldn't be saying those things. It's made it evident why you have left. And I'm like, he didn't even say anything bad. He just said, I think he was like along the lines of, I was blinded for 2 years, keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
No names, no nothing. Like, I was like, so then I took the brunt of that, and he was pissed because they started coming after me. Pissed. And I was like, honestly, babe, like, I'm not even stressed about it. Let them, if that makes them feel better at the end of the day, let them. It's going to be water off my back. And like, finally, I was so pissed at like about the lies that have been spewed out of the mouths of those people,
Mm-hmm.
that I was just like, you know what? Keep lying. Keep saying what you want to say. I really don't care. If somebody genuinely wants to know, they'll come to me. But until then, like, it shows that they're just as blinded as you and that, like, they are.
Well, what's funny is like, I've told Justice is if I really wanted to put more stuff out there, I could. I
Yeah.
don't. I'm not out to get anybody.
No.
I pray for them and I hope the best for them. I'm hoping a heart change.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is like I am not purposely trying to like, what kind of content can I create about them today?
Yeah.
Who can I
You
really
have bigger
bother?
fish to fry.
No, I'm a busy person. I'm an officer in the army, so I'm busy doing army stuff. Two, when I come home, I don't want to be dealing with that.
No.
I don't have that time. But here's the thing: when there's so public about certain things, it's kind of hard to resist the.
Yeah.
What's up with the politics thing? What's up
Yeah.
with this thing? It's like I ask those questions, and then what's funny is like even when I do make my content that's inspired by some things they say and do, I don't mention names or anything like that. I just say, here's something I noticed because it's not just them. I see a lot of churches. Look at right now, all these churches that are coming out with these pastors who are getting in trouble for essaying kids and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That mega church in Dallas, you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
that more and more and more and more. All these mega church pastors, these big time names, it's coming out of the woodworks. The truth's coming out. And the thing is, I think if until this church that we're talking about, especially repents
Yeah.
and fixes what they need to fix, the truth will come out. It's
Oh,
not a
yeah.
matter of if it'll come out. No, it's
When?
when. It will. And it's not my place to bring it out. I think it's going to come out.
Oh, yeah.
I know some other people that have a lot more receipts than I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just waiting for that day.
Yeah. Me
But
too.
but I think those the truth will, and I think our role is just to stand strong when the trolls come our way. I made a video just today about trolling,
Mm-hmm.
about hey, how to identify, but what should you do? And honestly, the biggest thing for me is just ignoring it
Yeah.
after a while. You can't keep engaging. I'll engage for a moment just for entertainment's sake to see where it goes, see if this maybe might be fruitful. Maybe I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah.
I'm hoping maybe one day one of my posts like, oh, like you
The
guys
light bulb comes on.
like y'all with the
Mm-hmm.
with the tithing one, I had what's funny about this, I had sat on that for months upon months.
Yeah, that's what
Jess had sent that to me and I was like, oh gosh, I can make a video right now about that. But you know what? Let me pray about this. I don't want to be reactive. I want to be prayerful. And then one day I was scrolling through my pictures and my screenshots. I'm like, I think it's time.
Yeah.
And I thought about it. I practiced it. I wanted to do it right. I didn't want to be, ugly about it. I just wanted to, hey, here's the truth. Be wary of places like this. This is not biblical,
Not at all.
and I think hopefully people will see like, again, like the politics thing. That's not biblical.
Mm-mm.
You look at Jesus. I had the argument the other day of Jesus was not political. If you look at the Bible, anytime they try to trip him up in politics, he was either changing the subject or walking the other way. They try to make him king. Nope. They try to ask him questions that were, kind of politically stimulating. And he's like, I get what you're doing here.
Yeah.
He was smarter than that. He was very shrewd, and then I look at now, what would Jesus be like? Honestly, I think Jesus would be called demonic in our modern church. I think he would be called a heretic in our modern church.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of these modern churches, if Jesus would walk in their door, they wouldn't know what to do with him.
Tables would be flipping.
I mean, let's say he didn't. He said he just walked in and just wanted to experience it, but he asked questions. They would be freaking out. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves because Jesus, in all reality, is not a political figure, And here's the thing: is I get it, we don't compromise certain things, but we also don't need to be pushing this in your face 24/7, like y'all said with the sermons. After a while, it's like, okay, we get it. Let's just
Move
preach the
on,
Bible.
please.
Let's just read Genesis or, Esther or something, just break down the Bible. I want to understand. I want to be equipped. I want to leave here ready to go do things at my work or at home or that kind of stuff.
And isn't that what it's supposed to be? Isn't that what church is supposed to be? Is a place where they can become equipped to go out and be disciples of his word?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, where is that? Like, it makes me question that girl who might be sitting in the audience who dealt with an abortion.
Yeah.
Guess what? Jesus still loves you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jesus loves you. And you know what? Even if whatever pain you're going through right now, it won't last forever. If you feel that void with Jesus and you lean into him and that wasn't the best decision, like Don't let anybody tell you you're going to hell because of it, though.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody sit here and try to dictate what your life is doing, because number one, that's a very sensitive topic. Very sensitive topic. So when you have a pastor who's constantly like bashing over the head of that, why don't you take a step back and think about the audience? Think about that. What if somebody's scrolling on YouTube? You know, the whole, oh, we don't do church online, but you record it and put it online. Still makes no sense to me. But imagine if somebody who's a non-believer scrolls across like, let me check this out. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? Like, think about it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I look at this with the content that's being preached on that pulpit and on that church, the message they send.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing: I don't want to say everyone believes this stuff,
Yeah.
but I think the message that's being sent, it's a very divisive
Very.
message.
Oh, yes.
Because here's the thing: is Jesus loves you regardless if you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, if you're a hippie, if you're if you're a carnivore or you're a herbivore, you're
Yeah. You're
whatever,
whatever you
vegetarian.
are.
Those things, Jesus still loves you.
Yeah.
Now, there are certain things that Jesus doesn't want you to do and thinks that you shouldn't do and would prefer that you didn't do in your life to better your life.
Mm-hmm.
But God's love is despite us.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not because of us, it's despite who we are. We can do all the good things, attend all the services, serve in every team, but guess what? It's no different than the person who's living in the streets doing crack, Jesus still loves them. Now, does Jesus want them to do that? No, absolutely. He wouldn't condone that. That's the difference there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sad difference.
It's the whole love the sinner, hate the sin. And I swear, like, we live by that. Like, you may not, if you come into our home, you may not believe in God or you might have different viewpoints. We'll have a conversation. Yeah, I mean, you're in our home.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a conversation. And I have plenty of conversations with people who have different walks of life, who are doing this stuff. And I've actually had people like, I'll never forget one of my friends from nursing school. She looked at me and she was like, Katelyn, you're different. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, she goes, no, like you say you're a Christian, but you're different. She goes, you show this love that I feel like most people these days don't. And I was like, well, that's because like, I live by a rule, love the sinner, hate the sin. I'm going to do what Jesus calls me to do. And I'm not going to sit here and say what you're doing is right. You're not going to hear what you want to hear, but you're going to hear what I have to say because what Jesus says, and I'm going to say it in love. There's a
Absolute. Oh
difference.
gosh, yes. Say it in love.
Yes.
Say it with compassion, with humility,
Yeah.
with some empathy. Even
Yep.
that's the sad thing.
Yep.
But so let's wrap this up here. So, what are some lessons you and Brandon have learned here through this experience?
So, yeah, I mean, honestly, the biggest one being is don't depend on a place, a building to define who you are in Christ.
Mm.
Because it's you have to create that walk with God. Going to church is great, and I won't tell you not to go to church, but I will tell you make sure you do your research. What do they say about X, Y, and Z? Are they very open about these things? Look for those things, and if you have experienced something similar to what we've experienced and you're finding yourself not in church right now, first and foremost, that's okay. You need time to process that stuff and to get through it and start doing. Yes. Yes. And so we took a lot of that time and then we started getting back in. And so we're still looking around, but you know, don't put a time limit on that. You want to go where God wants you to go and ask him. He'll tell you. But the biggest thing is dive deeper into the word. You know, Context is everything. Don't let somebody take one single verse and smack it over your head 20,000 times until you're just like, oh my God, this is getting like, this is ridiculous. Take context. Do the five above, five below. What does it say in the, like, through the whole thing? Take it into context.
Who was it written for? Why
Mm-hmm.
was it written? How can this apply to you? Can it apply to
Yeah.
you? I'm gonna say this: if everything's applicable, then we shouldn't be eating bacon. I mean, just
To be
saying.
honest. But yeah, like, so biggest thing, don't depend on a church to know who God is. Do it yourself. And like I said, you're going through it. Allow yourself the time to heal, and get back to it, but be prayerful in it. You know, a lot of people like to say, "Hey, you're not praying. You're not doing this. You're not doing that." I'm like, first off, you're not around me. You don't know me.
Yeah.
Don't don't speak on my behalf when you don't know that. So do that, and then most importantly, talk to your spouse about it. Like seriously, because if we bring up a church and we're like, "Hey, let's look at this. Let's do this," or "Hey, research this one. I'll research this one. And we'll come together and talk about it."
Yeah.
Another lesson I've learned, unfortunately, the very hard way is, I don't want to say don't get involved, but when it comes to relationships in the church, be mindful.
Mm.
Be mindful, because it's either going to hurt you at the end of the day or it's not.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 99.5% of the time, depending on how stable a couple is, it may hurt you. So
That's sad.
yeah, be mindful about that. I'm not saying don't have friends, because it's important to grow that community. I mean, we've grown with you guys, and like we've had great conversations. We've talked about God, we've talked about the Bible, we've talked about context. Like we've done that stuff, and or like, "Hey, I don't know what this means. Tell me about it."
Yeah.
Like find somebody who wants that for you. And then, that kind of leads into my last thing, is that something my husband's always said is he's not going to stay around people who don't want to better you and want better for you.
Absolutely.
If you're finding that somebody is trying to do the whole, "my horse is bigger than your horse," turn around and walk away.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
And what's interesting about that is, just because people are church people, that doesn't make them good people.
Nope.
Church people are broken too.
Yeah.
And like you said, having a discerning spirit about other people, asking, being observant. I think it's okay to kind of slowly do that baby crawl into relationships and serving the church. I think you should serve. If you're going to be a part of something like a church organization, there's plenty of great churches out there.
Oh, yeah.
Right now Jess and I found a good church. We're
Mhm.
enjoying it. We're not serving you right away. We're
No.
just still, we're not trying to consume it, because I don't want to be a consumer, but I also want to take my time.
Yeah.
I want to ask questions. I want to talk to the pastor a few times. I want to talk to some of the other members of the church and get to know what the real vibe is, because it's easy to fall in love with the church or any organization and get that honeymoon feeling of,
yeah.
"Oh, it's so great. I can't wait to serve. I can't wait to do
The
this."
mask is on.
Yes,
Literally.
the blinders are on. But I think we have to go in with eyes wide open, open heart, open mind,
Yeah.
open eyes.
Yes.
And then, have our partner there, because like you said, Brandon's gift is discernment.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm sure you're going to be leaning on him a lot more. If he says, "I don't know, babe," you're like, "Okay."
That's all you got to say. Literally, that's all he has to say is no, or "This person's good for you, this person's not good for you." And like I said, he's been right every single time.
I mean,
Like, it's on record.
it's
Yes,
a trend.
he is right.
It's a trend. I mean, somehow that is the case.
Yeah.
But what? I want to thank you, Katelyn, for coming up here and doing this. We've been talking about this for a while. And I'm sure this be first of many, maybe, doing other things. I like to do one on mental health sometime in the future too. That'd be great. Heck, I would even talk to Brandon, just leadership. He's, an NCO in the Army. I love talking to people just about all kinds of different topics here. But I just want to thank you for taking your time and getting on the podcast here for Living Fully Fit. And just hopefully you, the audience, got something out of this. Again, this wasn't us just, "Oh, this church we dealt with was terrible." There were terrible things. There are some great people there that love Jesus and love God, and not everyone is blind to it. Some people just want to do good, like doing it for the youth or doing it for the kids. I've been there before, where I was a very toxic church, and I stayed in because I love my youth kids. I've been there.
Yeah.
So maybe you're there, you're trying to figure it out. Hopefully this story helps you. But either way, learn from it, grow from it, and hopefully you can find some spiritual healing, spiritual health in your own life. Thanks for watching another episode of Living Fully Fit with Coach AJ. Hopefully this episode helped you to navigate your own personal faith walk and get a little more spiritually healthy in your own life. If you have any questions about this kind of content and you want to learn more, make sure to put a comment in the comments here. I would love to talk to you and help you navigate through your faith journey as well. If you like this content and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe down below, hit the notification bell for updates for new future content. And if you enjoy this content and want to support the channel, put a thumbs up and make sure to copy a link and share with a friend. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again at Living Fully Fit with Coach AJ.